Welcome to another episode of Healing Through Love. Each week, we share ideas, experiences, and resources to increase the awareness of domestic and family violence and to empower survivors to grow and thrive. We talk with experts who share their advice, or with people who have experienced abuse, no matter where they are on their journey. This is all about healing through love. And now, here are your hosts, Charlene Lynch and Rose Davidson.
Domestic violence and sexual abuse can wreak havoc on our ability to care for ourselves financially. In episode 44, Diana Yáñez shares her thoughts.
Money looks like math because it has all these numbers in it, but it's really much more like psychology. Right? So we have to keep that in mind. And when it comes to like understanding our cash flow, what's coming in, what's going out, I divide it into 4 categories. And I'm very visual. So like if for anybody who's listening to this, just the audio, the 4 categories are income. So imagine one column where it says income. Another column is must-haves, and think food, shelter, minimum debt payment, your car registration, that kind of thing. Then money for your future. And the last category is money for your present, for like your current enjoyment. Right. And the recommendations for those, there's like percentages of how much each one should be. And it's helpful to think of money in these 4 buckets. And it's really...
The Healing Through Love podcast with Charlene Lynch and Rose Davidson. Hello and welcome to the Healing Through Love podcast. I'm your host, Rose Davidson from rosedavidson.com. Healing Through Love is a social enterprise that is trying to shift the awareness of domestic and family violence within the community and provide victim survivors with a soft place to land. Each week we discuss various topics with our guests, and today my guest is Diana Yáñez. And Diana is going to be discussing with us how to create stable and supportive financial systems. Now, as we know, domestic and violence and sexual abuse can wreak havoc on our self-confidence, including our ability to care for ourselves financially. The path to financial stability starts with acknowledging our resilience, creating a plan of action, and owning our vision for our best life and our capacity to get there. And we also know, too, that a lot of victim survivors have been manipulated into giving away their financial freedom. And so these things are well worth listening to and learning about, because some of us have lost the ability to manage our own finances. Now, a little bit about Diana. She is the founder of All the Colours, where she works to transform money management worldwide for women of colour entrepreneurs. Her vision is to create culturally aware systems for women of colour and to become a stable and supportive foundation for themselves, their loved ones and their community. She can fulfil this vision due to over a decade of experience with the financial industry, her time as a social worker and now as a coach. Welcome, Diana. Thank you so much for being with me today, and I look forward to our conversation.
Thank you. Thank you, Rose, for having me.
So how did you get into doing what you're doing presently? You know, what prompted you to help women, especially women of colour?
Well, I came into financial planning first when I was in college, and I thought the industry was so toxic that I ran the other way into social work. And as a social worker, that's where I did a lot of my work with people moving through domestic violence or being in the middle of domestic violence. And as a person who loves numbers, I eventually went back into the business world. And yet I also love working with people. And money really allows you to do both things. There's both the number aspect and the people aspect. So I also see a lot of suffering that happens around money. right? A lot of the times we're not really taught how to do money well. We don't even know what it means to do money well. It can be very confused. We can think that doing well with money is having a lot of things, when in fact, if you have a lot of things and you have a lot of debt or you have a lot of stress around money, then are you really doing well with money? So seeing all of the unnecessary suffering around money brought me back into this field. I have very much like a helping heart, a social worker's heart. And working with women, particularly women of color, we go through so much. We're kicked out of the system, so we're kept out of the system so much. My professional expertise is in the US. So in the US, women were not allowed to have credit cards in their own name, to have debt in their own name until 1974. Before that, it had to be in the name of their partner, their husband, right? Their father, their brother. There had to be a man who was vouching for her to have access to credit, right? It wasn't very long ago that women were just simply property. And in many parts of the world, women continue to be property. As a person of color, there's a lot of other racial inequities that have happened in the US. And I talk about like voicing your best life and your capacity to get there, is that sometimes even just saying out loud the thing that we want can be triggering, because a lot of the time we've kept our desires, the things that we want, the things that we want to build, very, very small in order to keep ourselves safe. Right. So I mean, as a woman, as a person of color, like I want to be able to serve my community, but I also see so much need in this area.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm working here.
Yeah. Women have been kept in the back lots for far too long. And yes, and you know, in the 70s, I remember as a child, I was amazed that women weren't allowed to do certain things because of their gender. It was very, very surprising. So yeah, I totally get the concept, and you know, that's only like 40 years ago, so it's not that long that women have been able to be financially independent. But when you're in when you're being financially abused, and then you all of a sudden are on your own, you know, what strategies could these people use to you know, become more financially free, because they may have spent years being financially abused and have no clue about anything. So, you know, what can they do to, I guess, educate themselves?
Yeah. And you know, and it's very similar to what anyone can do to educate themselves to become financially free. The thing that's different when you've been through financial abuse is that the work on money itself can bring such difficult memories that makes it hard to continue to work on it, right? So the first steps are often to understand your cash flow, understand what your income is, understand what your expenses are. If you are coming out of a situation where you currently don't have an income, well, it's understanding what are your resources, what are your needs, right? If you're being supported through any kind of social government, like the government funds, then really like getting clear on the numbers and doing so in a way that's not judgmental, right? I was just talking with a client earlier today who's getting started on building her budget. And I said, look through your previous credit card statements, checking accounts, look through your accounts, what's happening, and do it with curiosity, right? And if you sense yourself judging, get curious about the judging, right? It's not, my approach is very, very gentle because the thing that I'm working on is very, very tough. So imagine, I think of it as one of my favorite images is waterfalls. I recently saw a waterfall where it was literally, there was so much water going through that it had made a hole in a rock. So there was a waterfall going through the middle of a rock. And that's kind of the approach that we need to do with money, because money is it's so constant. It's a constant relationship that we have in our life. And as we're working with it, like sense when the flow is getting too heavy, when it's the emotions are getting too heavy, then kind of back off.
Yeah,
Right.
money
And then
can be
get
a very
curious.
triggering thing, can't it? It can bring up so many different emotions. I mean, as children, and most girls aren't taught how to handle money. They're given an allowance and just let let go, and they just spend it on whatever. But they're not taught budgeting skills. And I really do think that schools should bring that in and teach life skills to children. I think that's really lacking in the curriculum at any of the education facilities. And because a lot of parents don't budget well themselves, so how can they, if they've got bad budgeting skills or bad money skills, how can they pass on good skills to their children? And so I think schools should be looking at tangible life skills like budgeting or handling money, not just telling the difference between one coin and the other.
Right. And we learn our money management skills the same way we learn our relationship skills, right? So if you grew up seeing your parents relate to each other in a certain way, we'll probably replicate that as we get older. And it's the same thing with money. It's a topic that people rarely talk about. There was this research done where these two social scientists were at a park, and they were asking people about like their sex life. And people were more open about their sex life than they were about like their debt or their income. And it just goes to show how thick the taboo is around talking about it, which is why I remind people, be gentle with yourself as you're doing this, because sometimes we don't even have open money conversations with ourselves. Like we don't know, like if I don't know how much I'm spending, then everything's okay. And the stress that comes from either overspending or getting yourself into debt, like it can be very heavy to work through.
Yeah, I know. I've got bipolar, and when I was in my depressive states, I used to go and spend money to make me feel better. But I got myself into so much debt because it was the things that I bought weren't necessarily necessary. They were nice things to have. And so when I became out of the depressive state, I'd realized that, oh my God, I was just so stressed about how I was going to pay my credit card debt off, because just it was impossible. It was just so high. And yeah, and so you have to be wary of your moods too when you're spending your money.
Yeah, and money looks like math because it has all these numbers in it, but it's really much more like psychology. Right. So we have to keep that in mind. And when it comes to like understanding our cash flow, what's coming in, what's going out, I divide it into 4 categories. And I'm very visual. So like if for anybody who's listening to this, just the audio, the 4 categories are income. So imagine one column where it says income. Another column is must-haves, and think food, shelter, minimum debt payment, your car registration, that kind of thing. Then money for your future. And the last category is money for your present, for like your current enjoyment. Right. And the recommendations for those, there's like percentages of how much each one should be. And it's helpful to think of money in these 4 buckets. And it's like 1 income bucket and then 3 spending buckets, because it makes it easier to kind of balance, like, where is my money going? The first 2, your must-haves and the one for the future, automating it as much as possible. If you have a bank account, automatically having money go towards your rent, towards your savings. The last one you can track a little bit more. And the thing that's, again, for people coming out of financial abuse, it's important to keep in mind how you're doing as you're setting this up, right? Like, what are you asking money to do? Like you just said, going out and spending money helped you feel better. And it was also, we also have to look at the consequences of that, right? And learning or developing that long-term skill of like looking at what the it takes some time. Another thing that's really important is when we're in fear, when we're kind of activated and that freeze, flight, fight symptom of our brain, of just like survival instincts, our cognitive capacity goes offline. Right?
Yeah, certainly
So
does. Yes.
we're just thinking about, how do I survive? And a lot of the times money is so linked to survival because we literally use it to pay for food and shelter, right? It's like the thing that helps us survive. So it makes sense that even all of the knowledge isn't going to help us if our cognitive capacity is offline.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, I could, because I've lived experience of that, so I totally get the concept of that. It's and it's quite frightening when you get the credit card statement at the end of the month and you think, oh my God, did I spend that much, when you didn't realize that it's, money doesn't grow on trees, and all those old sayings that, money's finite. Not it's not infinite. So there's no buckets that you can take from if you haven't been saving. And even that, then you can still overspend and have to take out of your savings for, if you were saving for something special.
And another really interesting thing about money is that it's often not so much about the amounts, because I've worked with clients who were earning $500,000 a year and were living month to month. Like they had no savings, because as they earned more, they would spend more. Right. So it's around mindset and learning, like, how do you set some aside for the future? And culturally, we don't have a huge practice of thinking of ourselves as stewards of our money. We don't think like, oh, let me manage this well. So changing our identity to becoming a person that has that extra cushion for the future takes time. And I recommend people start off slow, right? So if you know what your income is and you can start saving a tiny bit, even if it's 1%, 2%, it just changes you to see yourself as a person who saves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. I think you've got to change. People have to change the way they think about money. So yeah, it's a mindset thing. And if you educate yourself onto saving the money, even if you save, if it's only a small amount every week or month or whatever the case may be, it will become easier. It'll just become a habit.
And I invite people to look at their, like, whenever they're looking at their cash flow, to think of it as somewhere between like going to the dentist to get your teeth cleaned, right? It's like a thing that you do routinely, but also getting a massage, like making it be self-care and seeing how, especially if it's an area of your life that you never looked at before, that you were frightened by, as you become more, as you own your power in that area of your life more, it ends up it can feel really good. It can feel like there's a source of pride in being able to care for yourself. It's kind of like when we learn how to cook for ourselves or pay our own rent, like there's this growing sense of mastery, right? And I love getting clients to the point where their money systems feel so stable that they're not even thinking about it anymore.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, is stability. We need to work on that so that, we don't have to think about it. Just it happens and in the background, and we know when we look at our bank statement, oh, I've managed to save that much, because it's just comes out automatically. And I think that's a good feeling when you think, oh, now I can afford to buy this widget, whatever it happens to be, because you've saved for it, but not consciously aware of how much you've put towards it over the months or years.
So and it's definitely like, yes, enjoying your money, buying the widgets that you want to buy, while without guilt, right? It's kind of like, how do you learn when I was younger, I had an eating disorder, and coming to a point where I felt comfortable with food took a lot of effort because I was very, very destructive. And over time, I learned that skill set. You know, it took a lot of trial and error. It took many, many years for me to feel more comfortable with both my body and the way that I ate. And sometimes the thoughts come back, but I don't have to act on them anymore because I see the thoughts as kind of like being they're invitations. Like there's probably something stressful happening in my life that I'm not taking care of. It's the same thing with money. For anybody who has a history of overspending to the point where they're like like they're going through self-hatred because they spent so much, it can be a behavioral addiction, right? So learning how to move through it. It's possible.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was a really good point, that it is a behavioral addiction. It's something that we do because we hate ourselves at the end of the day, for whatever reason, and we use money as a psychological soother, I suppose.
Yeah, it's a pacifier.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and we need to find out what triggers us to spend the money, and try and find ways to overcome those triggers
and find other ways to fill the need. Right? Because there was a need that I was expressing in a way that was very self-destructive, but there was a need there. Right? And when I work with my clients, a lot, again, if they're very, very avoidant of their money because it was used as a tool of abuse in the past, it makes sense that they don't want to look at their money, right? It brings up bad memories. So then it's learning how to stay within the range of tolerance so that you don't completely dissociate, and learning how to have and practicing experimenting positive money experiences.
Yeah.
Again, and here I'm thinking of domestic violence and family violence. There's often a lot of sexual violence that's also part of it. So it's not as extreme. Money's not as extreme, but it's coming to like, okay, if you've experienced sexual violence, how do you get to a place where you are able to enjoy that part of your life, enjoy your sexuality? With money, it's similar. You've experienced abuse. And that's the thing that's so difficult about TV, about domestic violence, is how all-encompassing it is. Right? And slowly learning, having positive experiences in each area of your life. Like, it takes time and it's possible. And recovery or healing is very, very cyclical. So I talk to people about having money feedback systems. For example, maybe every week you look at what happened that week. What did you spend? And for 10 minutes, right? You might not see everything, but for 10 minutes, you just look what happened. And maybe once a month, you look at your statements, at your balances. Maybe once a quarter, you have a goal of making an extra payment towards debt. Right? It's like setting times and tracking your progress. So maybe your net worth, your debt, your assets are here right now, and they slowly start to change. It's just kind of seeing what's happening. And the point isn't so much to like hoard a giant amount of money, but to be balanced with it, to know that your income and your outflows are supportive of the life that you have today.
Yeah, that is so true. And it's comforting to know that you've got a backstop. If you've been able to save money, it's good to know that. It's comforting to know that if something goes wrong in your life, or some major expense comes up, you've got that backstop for yourself, and so you don't need to stress where that extra few dollars is going to come from.
Yeah, there's a lot of freedom that can come from having, I literally call it a cash cushion, right? It's an emergency fund, but it's a cushion because there's stuff that comes up. People get sick, cars break down. People get, one of the recommendations when you're looking at your budget is that your must-haves, your food and shelter, like your minimum expenses, be about half of your income. Because at least in the US, correct me what it's like in Australia, but in the US, if you become unemployed, there's usually unemployment insurance, which covers about half of your income.
Yeah.
Right. So that way, at least your food and shelter is covered. And just knowing what those percentages are can give you kind of a sense of ease of, okay, I could cover myself for this many months.
Yeah. Yeah, we have it here. You don't necessarily have to work to receive unemployment benefit here. But the money's not great. I must say it's probably half of the minimum wage. So it's not a lot of money, and it's like less than $40 a day, I think, or yeah, something like that. So it's not a lot. And so to try and save money out of that is, I take my hat off to people who can, actually buy nice stuff without going into debt to do so. I mean, they obviously have their money management skills, right up there to the top.
No, maybe they have a really strong income too. Right.
No, but if there are unemployment benefits, it's just a set
that's
income.
true.
So yeah, it's not, as I said, it's not great. So I take my hat off to people who can, afford to go out to dinner or do whatever that. So they must live a pretty frugal life, I suppose, but they've got the money management skills down to a fine art.
Yeah. And another way to start to grow your ease with money is to, again, think of it as a self-care activity, right? Maybe if once a week you spend 10 minutes looking at what happened that week with your money, either on your phone or your credit card statements, your bank statements, and looking at what cash receipts you have. Maybe lighting a candle during that time. Maybe rewarding yourself with a walk in your favorite park or your favorite TV show, like doing something afterwards that says like, oh, that was good. I did something good. I did something that I'm growing my positive ability to do that. And also like understanding what things are difficult, right? So let's say, for example, that, during the holidays, you always have a tendency to go into debt, or you have a lot of resentment because you have to purchase these goods, like kind of looking back to see what have I learned about me and money, and then looking forward, how do I make a plan for that? I know buffets are always the most difficult thing for me to manage. So like I had to learn, how do I go to a buffet without leaving either angry that I didn't have anything or angry that I had too much? Like, how do we learn what balance looks like?
Yeah, and all things in moderation, basically. It's, if you can be moderate with your money, then, it'll go further. My husband's got this saying, money's made flat to stack, and I reckon it's made round to go round.
Yeah, sometimes we call it flow, right? Your circulation plan. I remember one of my mentors called it her circulation plan.
I have to support the economy.
I have to support local farmers and
absolutely.
ice
Yeah, that's my reasoning. Diana, you've got a thing here, your media kit, that you, it's a service or a product that you wanted to promote today.
Definitely. So I offer workshops that are specific to, like, if you want to learn how to do a budget, a budget, I call it. You can hire me to come and like teach your group how to do how to build your own budget. I also do private coaching. I also do group coaching because a lot of what I work with is really behavioral change. And the fastest way to change behavioral is to join a group of people who are doing the thing that you want to do. The next cohort is going to start this fall. And that's I have 10 people at a time, 10 to 12 people who join. We meet every week for 1 month. So 4 consecutive meetings where we're really getting the systems set up, like understanding our money history, understanding where we're headed, our vision, our money patterns, and building like what are all the areas of our money that we're going to look at. And then we meet monthly for 5 more months. So it's a 6-month program. I find that that's like the best way to do this work with people because money is a lifelong relationship. So in those 6 months, it's really to like build these systems and test them. We often kind of when we're changing behavior, it's common for us to have setbacks. And yet, when you're with a group of other people who are on that same journey, you're much more likely to continue and you're going to learn from others. Right? So that's my group coaching. I do workshops and I do private coaching. I take up to 10 clients at a time. So right now I have space for a couple.
Oh, excellent business. And you can find Diana on LinkedIn and on Instagram. Where else can they find you, Diana?
I'm also active on Twitter, and then there's my website. My website is allthecolors, ALLTHECOLORS.net, not for network. And I named my business All the Colors because when I work with people, like I want to see the depth of their emotion, both like the joyful parts of money, the parts of money where they're kind of frightened, the parts of money where they're confused, even where they're bored. It's like, come as you are. Come as you are.
Lovely. It's great to know. Diana, if you were to offer some words of wisdom, what might they be?
My words of wisdom, definitely be curious about your money experience. Be curious about where it started. When you sense the judgment, be curious about that and do it within your range of tolerance. Like I literally went to trauma training in order to be able to do this work well. And staying within our range of tolerance is really important.
Yeah, I totally agree. So don't go too far outside your comfort zone, especially when you're just starting out, because it can be a dangerous place to be. Diana, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure to meet you and to speak with you today. And good luck with everything in the future.
Thank you.
Bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye.
The Healing Through Love podcast with host Charlene Lynch and Rose Davidson would love to acknowledge Global Glamping Charities Incorporated for generously supporting this podcast. Global Glamping Charities, solving homelessness in all of its forms. Reach out to them at globalglamping.org.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Healing Through Love. You can get further resources, see the show notes, or simply reach out to us via our website at htlaustralia.org. Thanks so much for joining us, and we look forward to your company next time on the Healing Through Love podcast.